Hey, it's good to see you, Jennifer. Thanks for being willing to have this conversation with me.
Oh,
It's
happy to be here, Joey.
So we've been having these, exchanges about what is gender critical, and I know that I've distanced myself a lot from even using that phrase, and I've been moving more towards something that I believe you are also, which is this sort of pro reality. We talk or put, hashtag pro reality, and I wondered what you thought. What do you think about that gender critical versus pro reality, and what does this mean? And in light of conversations that are happening online today.
I think it was like a couple of months ago, I made this tweet. I made it a Facebook post too, which was like, fuck gender critical. Because it just doesn't really work to express what it is that so many of us are fighting for, which is reality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people really aren't gender critical, like conservatives, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
They are for reality and for, male and female. But I wouldn't call them gender critical, So I just thought, pro reality is far more encompassing. There's a lot broader constituency that is fighting for that,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to gender critical. Radical feminists are gender critical. I'm gender critical. And I think that those things can work together.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be gender critical, or you can be gender critical, but you have to be pro reality.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, in what's being called the gender critical community, we don't have that baseline of
Mm-hmm.
fighting for reality.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people are getting tweaked because they see, different perspectives emerging, and different people and organizations that they thought were part of this one community, the gender critical community,
Mm-hmm.
are going in different directions, are critiquing each other, and they're kind of like, oh my God, the gender critical movement is coming apart at the seams. What are we gonna do? And I'm looking at that going like, oh no, this is like a really great thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't call yourself a movement, first of all, if you're not moving.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the whole idea of a movement, is that you're moving, that you're critiquing yourself constantly. You have to.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to change things up when things aren't working. And you have to take the critiques of your purported comrades into consideration,
Mm-hmm.
as you're moving along, So I don't know, I've been sort of thinking about all that. And I think pro reality, is far, far more befitting than gender critical.
Mm-hmm.
For, the most important part of what we're fighting is for reality, because that's what's, the state is trying to take away from us.
Mm-hmm. I think I like that take, because when you say pro reality, the thing is that that's what I believe the general public understands is reality. They understand that, adult human male, adult human female, they get that. They get that their sons are their sons and their daughters are their daughters, the brothers or sisters and all that. And that's not the elite. That's not the elite. I'm talking about the general public in the Western world anyway. And this idea, if we believe in pro reality, and if we believe in working across the aisle, as a lot of us say, because those of us in this gender critical community, again, community group movement, all that stuff, have really not been able to have one specific strategy. Like you say, it's not a monolithic group of people, but I do think that more people that are outside of it, they understand pro reality, because most of them don't have a grasp of feminism, and they don't have a grasp of what gender ideology, the destructiveness of that, because they really have a distorted sense of feminism, if one at all.
Right.
And that what's assumed of gender critical people is that all of us have a misconception that we all are thinking critically about gender. I think that a lot of different kinds of things have come in the way that has blocked us from doing that deeper examination. And it's for a variety of reasons. But why do you think that is, that we're still looking at within this idea of certain colleagues or groups that you'd want to work with or whatever, and you think they have said that they're gender critical, and yet they're still sharing articles and doing the pronoun thing? And why do you think we keep bumping up against this, Jennifer?
I think mostly it's propaganda, because we have been saturated with, 24/7 propaganda about gender being the issue, when gender is not the issue here. Mm-hmm. This is the state deconstructing sex. They're deconstructing humanity, but the base of our humanity, the roots of our humanity as a species are in sex. Mm-hmm. So that's why sex is being targeted and dismantled in language and law and in material reality. Mm-hmm. But we've had so much propaganda related to gender, and feminists have certainly been at the forefront of this issue. And we're very, very plugged into gender and how it has, how problematic that is for women, because we have to, because we're on the bottom, in that equation, of gender stereotypes. We get a specific set of stereotypes, not just related to our biology, but related to dominance versus submission. And again, conservatives probably don't see it that way. They see gender stereotypes are sort of related to, biology. So, and it's a fascinating topic. I mean, we could definitely go, for eons more talking about this topic. How does it relate to us as a species? Gender stereotypes overlaid on biological sex, and then add in, same-sex attraction. It's like, well, whoa, like, what is all this? We could just go on and on talking about this. But in the meantime, the state is deconstructing sex, which is the mission here of the gender industry. But we keep getting caught in that loop, and I think some of us are starting to wind our way out of that, and that's what I was talking about before in terms of, all this, upheaval within this community, and people going in different directions and critiquing each other and stuff. I think a lot of us are just like fed up with, with all of that stuff, talking about gender stereotypes, talking about fetishes, talking to the AGPs. How do they feel? What have they been going through since they were little, and blah, blah, blah. We have to be compassionate with people that have fetishes, and and it's like, no, like we don't have time for this. We really don't have time for this. We have to look at, institutionally and systematically how they're deconstructing sex. We need lawsuits, we need people on the ground doing protests, in front of gender clinics. We need so much stuff that's not happening because all these, conversations with these like fetishes and pedo apologists and, people that are still engaged in this industry, taking drugs, having surgeries. It's like we're all attached to this mystical thing that's been created, this thing called trans, when it's really a corporate illusion. It's just a corporate illusion. There's only men and women. That's all there is. And everything else is bullshit. It's just corporate illusion. It's propaganda that's created this. Why do we have such interest in people that are taking drugs and having surgeries? I mean, it's because this mysticism has been created around this, this fiction. And we're all immersed in it. And the people that think they're not immersed in it anymore are just as immersed in it. So it's really hard to find our way through that. It's like we're swimming in a sea of lies,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm. Do you think this is something, I was thinking about Kara Dansky's title of her book. She didn't call it The Abolition of Gender. Okay.
Right.
For a reason, for a very specific reason. And when we go back to like the work of Julia Long and others that have talked about how important it is for the language. And I want to say it's so interesting. There was an article that came out in the Pitt publication. I thought it was really, ironic, since there's been a lot of, energy around that whole thing. And the author of this article is a mother who's talking about how she's never lied to her son, and that keeping that consistent throughout his life, that when this stupid fad, came into his life, that it left just as easily, like out the door, like a poof, that it just happened like that, because she felt in the end, her history of telling the truth is what won out with that. Now, it's not always
Was that
the case.
today's article? I think that was today's article, right? From Pitt?
Well, yeah, when we're recording this today, it's the 22nd of February here.
Yeah.
It's a great article. And
yeah, I read that. It was very, very good.
Yeah. And
The
there's
other thing she said was she immediately limited his tech, his time on tech.
That's right.
Which is really, really key here.
Exactly.
I think part of part of the thing that we initially started talking about in terms of, everybody going in different directions, and people tripping, getting tripped up because other people are having critiques and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's like people sort of want to sort of do things behind a curtain, you know what I mean? And then come out and say, well, this is where we stand, right? Mm-hmm. But they forget that none of our lives are like this anymore. We don't have privacy in that context anymore.
Yeah, we have a digital society, right? That's it.
Yeah. I mean, we're being surveilled 24/7. All of our stuff is online. Just try and hide parts of yourself. I mean, it's like really hard, right? So I think that it's part of being part of a technological society. We don't get to have that privacy. We don't get to have consciousness raising groups in the way that they used to in the 60s, where people sit around and discuss in rooms, the issues and come to some sort of clarity amongst themselves before they go and put things out in public. It's sort of like they're working that stuff out.
It gets tested out. It gets tested out, argued, debated. Yeah.
Yeah. So that stuff is it's getting done in the public eye, and people are not, they're not comfortable with that, but it's like, well, that's, this is what we're up against. We don't have a private society anymore. And we don't meet in rooms.
Yes.
We're not all on the same page.
Yeah. That thing, and it's something that I brought up recently, I think in another interview, about chemistry. I mean, it's really different when we meet each other in person and get in a room and you're going to talk about actually strategizing. That involves a lot of chemistry, and it involves a lot of nuance, and it involves a lot of patience. And I think that because we have this digital society going on, we've got the Bird app, and people that normally wouldn't be expressing themselves in such quick ways to anger. I mean, just they can come out with the slurs and even death threats and, really crazy stuff very quickly. And I think what that's done, and I know in the work that I've done with others like Erin, who knows digital life very well, because it's a lot of her world, the idea of rewiring and no matter what age we are, if you spend a lot of time on your phone, on a screen, and that's mostly what you're doing, it really is changing the wiring and the chemistry of our actual physiology. And I think because of the detachment from nature that so many people have had, particularly during, these lockdowns and whatnot, that separation from nature, and this has been brought up a lot of times, adds to the quickness and the impatience and the fear of people actually having disagreements. Because when you get in a room, you smell each other, you see what other people are wearing. You're going to have all kinds of filters. We're reacting to a lot of things that get completely missed. Tone gets missed in just writing something on Facebook.
And we're having these conversations. You're on social media. You're not just meeting somebody in a room. You're meeting dozens, hundreds, thousands of people in a room. Everybody is watching your conversation. So it's like, wow. When you think about what's really, really happening to us, it's pretty bizarre,
Yeah, I was talking to Erin Brewer about this recently in an interview, and the idea of, same for my generation, if somebody asked me how many followers I had, I'd be like, what do you mean? Who's following me, right? Who's following me? And then there's the whole thing of, I know we weren't going to really get into this today, but it brings up that thing about fangirling that, I really want to get into deeper at some point. But the idea of having followers and being aware, as what you said, it's not just one or two people that you're talking with, right there in a thread. It's that 5 months later, a year later, 3 years later, if you didn't get rid of that thing, like on Facebook or a tweet or something, and maybe your values have changed over time. Oh, heaven forbid. I know that in April of 2019, when I got banned, from Twitter, and I immediately had this thought, it made me so angry. And my reaction was, well, I'm going to have a conference. I just have to have a conference. I've been thinking, I'm just going to do it. And of course, it seemed like it was like a crazy thing at that time. And of course, this is pre-COVID. But the ideas that I had about this conference, which I don't know why I thought it would happen in August of 2020. I think it's because all this production stuff I've done. I thought it's going to be big, and I'm going to give it like more than a year to think about how that could happen, and the money that I knew that I was going to have to come up with. But the values that I had were really no different than they are today. But I postured a different position because I thought that I had to, so that I wanted to have a trans person, at least one, on my, come to or whatever the conference
I forgot about that.
And I had that for many, many, many months. I mean, that thought was in my brain for like 11 months that I thought, well, I'm going to have to go that direction to slowly pull people towards reality, because they weren't ready. I felt like they weren't ready, because during that time also, I had already been cooking in my mind this idea of what became months later the 4 horsemen of the gender critical apocalypse. I knew that if I brought those ideas out, that I was going to be viewed as being too hard, too direct, basically what? A turf, which is what I was reaching out to be able to. I wanted to have turfs actually come to the conference so we could see that we're not crazy. Because what I was experiencing in San Francisco that had been going on since the 90s, I knew that friends of mine and I felt literally crazy, which is what any outliers do, right? When you're looking at something and you see everybody else is saying 2 + 2 is 5. What's wrong with you? And that's what it feels like. So it was really important to think about getting like minds together. But then I also wanted to reach out, like you were saying, people that understand pro-reality. And for a lot of us with a very socially progressive, blah, 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 thinking along political lines that were more, quote, progressive and all this stuff, we didn't want to talk to Republicans. We didn't want to talk to anybody that was, anti this or that was going to be a problem, and I realized early on, these are exactly the people that I need to reach out to. I don't want to be oversaturated with that, but a number of the people that I had all of 2021 in my protests from across the country, many of them voted for Trump or didn't vote or were feeling very politically homeless. But I know that all of those people believed in what you brought up and said, a pro-reality. And again, me going back to this thing about if we agree that things start first with language and then they go into law, and reading Kara's book, how important that is, I feel, as a baseline. If we were going to have anything that was like a Bible that could get people that normally call themselves conservative or whatever, I see, and I don't know how you feel about this. I feel politically homeless because Democrats, which I've always been, they now feel like that's the new right to me, is Democrats and what they're doing because of the obfuscation of everything and how they are crushing women literally in language and law. So this thing about being worried that even I was in putting on this conference, it wasn't a worry for me that people weren't going to like me. I had to let go of that many, many years ago. But the idea that people wouldn't listen, and that was my more important mission. How do I get people to listen to more reality at that time? And by the time the conference happened, and as you know, because you were one of the presenters, and it was online and it became global, I didn't really need to have a trans person, any of this fictional identity, and then soon starting to turn into non-binary. That was the next thing that was coming along. I didn't need it by August. I did not need it by August of 2020. People were further along and they were hungry for some other people in the world that were feeling the same way. And in that were a number of parents that just started realizing, oh, gender ideology is this thing. It's come into my home. It's captured my child. What the hell do I do? And so that was one of the things I wanted to lead into this discussion was, and bringing up the Pitt article that came out today, where here's this parent saying, I've always told my kid the truth. What do you think about that in relation to, parents that I know you've gotten pushback from because of the article that you wrote about ROGD becoming an identity for some parents?
Yeah. I didn't really write that, as an attack against either Pitt or GenSpect.
Mm-hmm.
It was really more of a critique of, it definitely was a critique of GenSpect, not necessarily Pitt.
Mm-hmm.
Pitt are just parents that are writing articles, about their kids. I've got really not much to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a lot of defensive-ness, more than I expected. I mean, I expected some, but there was much more defensiveness from parents that I didn't quite, expect it to be that severe. But it was really a critique of the whole, these parent organizations, these organizations that are sort of bordering on becoming NGOs. Mm-hmm. Setting themselves up as, kind of too many things as far as GenSpect goes. I mean, if you're going to be a parent organization and sort of help new parents, parents that are new to this issue, navigate this course with their children, and you're going to do this based on a therapeutic model, then you should probably have a little privacy and do that privately. But if you're going to do that as an online organization that is also politically motivated, and you're going to do lobbying, and you're going to try to address laws in different countries and adhere to those different countries' laws in terms of what you can say and what you can't say, you're going to run into like a lot of problems, mm-hmm. Which GenSpect is now, because they're trying to do and wear too many hats. Mm-hmm. And I'm also very, very critical of the whole therapy model in general. Not that I don't think that therapy is sometimes valuable or that it can't be valuable in this instance. Mm-hmm. But I think that, there's a time and a place for grief. And at a certain point, you have to move on from that. And the way to ameliorate grief and become alive again is to find justice, mm-hmm. In the world. And like if you look at the parents of Megan's Law, they got that law passed. It took them a long time, mm-hmm. But their daughter was abducted and murdered, mm-hmm. To my best recollection. And, they went and got a law passed. This is how you find restoration. Mm-hmm. And if you don't move on to that phase, then you wind up sort of trapped in this victimhood mode. And so that was kind of, I was critiquing that, and also the obfuscating that, Gen Spec does. They've been critiqued out in public by numerous people, and they keep digging their heels in. They don't answer questions that are appropriate to be asked of a professional organization. Well, it's on our website. Go find it yourself. And somebody will go there and then they'll find conflicting information. Like, we don't agree with transitioning of children, but, then you have, they're platforming people that are still embodying the ideology that they're purportedly resisting. It's absolute madness. And this is what I mean by swimming in lies, that the people that are purportedly resisting this ideology are holding fast to it with the other hand. They don't want to let it go.
Why not? What do you think? What's the gain in that, or is there some kind of...
Well, I think that this whole issue of gender and gender stereotypes has been with us a really, really long time. I mean, we've been living under patriarchy for how many years? We're saturated with it, right? It's the sea that we swim in. And so I think there's that, and I think it's also the propaganda. I mean, we have the greatest propaganda machine available ever. And it's been used to great effect, to get people to buy into this absolute bullshit. It's actually, you strip it away and there's nothing there but men and women. That's it. It's hilarious. It's almost funny. Do you know what I mean? How people will buy into it. Like I watch, some of these YouTube bloggers, these YouTube personalities and stuff, and having these transgender people on there, and like everybody's so fascinated, and they have these like really huge followings, and it's like, what? It's just nuts.
And it has affected pretty much. I was talking to somebody yesterday about, they said, well, why do you think, there's always this thing of, why do you think this happened? And I noticed an awful lot of, isn't this just a white thing? I was talking to a friend who's not white. And one of the concerns that came up, and he noticed, and I was just gutted. I went to Mills College for a while, which used to be a women's college here in the Oakland area in California. And Mills College has a sister high school that is about 2 miles away, and it's called Fremont High. Fremont High, when I was at Mills, one of the things I did was I became a liaison between the high school and the college, and it was part of my anthropology studies. I had to write papers about it, and also I was a mentor to some of the kids. They wanted to start something called a gay-straight alliance. They needed an adult, though, to help them sort of sign off on that, and I helped in that. And it was a whole thing of just trying to protect some of the kids that were more being bullied at the school, whether they thought they were gay or lesbian or not. To think, my God, that's like 20 years ago now, right? And what that has become. So I'm talking to my friend, and he pointed out, he sent me a link that Fremont High, which is largely Black and brown and some Asian, very working class to poor kids, they have just hired, I don't even remember the name of the organization, is coming in there. It's one of these rainbow coalition, but it's literally called like the transgendered lunchbox or something weird, or clothing affirmation or something like that, closet, for this idea that I'm thinking, my God, this is it. They went after the white kids, middle class, upper middle class, white demographic that would have money to be able to do therapy. A lot of that. And that's where so much of the advertising and everything went. From what I've seen of you following the money, do you agree that it's been pretty much a white, a white aimed movement?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then what about the class? Do you have anything attached to that when you think about it? I mean, in my
Well,
own.
I think a lot of the kids that are getting sucked in are the kids that have, high exposure to technology.
Mm-hmm.
And then whether, they have other vulnerabilities attached to that is going to play a very big role.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that kids that, kids that don't have access to everything that they want and lots of tech and toys and time to be on tech and toys, they're out in the community, they're not getting pulled into this. So yeah, I think it's middle to upper class families, and it's very white. I mean, they're trying to use Black people as a to weaponize the civil rights movement, to pull Black people into this, but it's not working, and Black youth are not transition. I mean, they do some, but I mean, on the whole, the numbers are not there. Alex of the Gender Mapper did a great article about this, and she used not Gen Specs, I think it was Glissen's numbers.
Yes. Listen, yeah, that's where she got the numbers from.
Their statistics, their own statistics, and that piece that just came out from the Transgender Law Center is all about how they've been using, this, the Black trans woman trope and all these other, things that are related to the Black civil rights movement to try and, rope people in, but it's not working. So now what are we going to do? And that was a document that wasn't supposed to be publicized, but it was let out, right? Right. So it's, I mean, they actually tell you what they're doing, oh yeah, we're using Black people and it's not really working. So we really have to do something else now.
Well, I think the something else now is something that my friend came across and shared with me, and this thing about, my own experience with this high school, my history with that, and thinking, I mean, those kids were just really basic, basic kids. The problem that they had 20 years ago is that young women were getting pregnant and, having to go to the clinic there for pregnancy issues and birth control and stuff. And now with this idea that they've got this company who has come from the outside and they're going to start talking to them about clothing and all this stuff for gender expansiveness. And again, it's another phrase that we're seeing a lot. I went, oh my God, this is another way that now they're getting to working class, non-whites. And it's something that reminds me of some of the work that Dr. Suzanne Vierling has brought up around. She enlightened me to a while ago in the Southern California area with foster kids. It's like this is an industry that's moved from an initial target population, a demographic that, as because you say it's capitalism, stupid. It has to increase, and they always have to find new customers and new bodies in this case. And the experimentation goes on, and the literal medical experiments are expanding, and new things are coming up about, leading to this non-binary surgeries, which are really expanding. And again, Gender Mappers got into this. So I think that we're moving from, and a lot of the pushback that recently came from some parents, I wanted to ask you, did you also have, because I know that I have gotten I would say almost a flood of positive feedback from a certain number of parents who really are liking that there is this questioning of the therapy model, that they themselves, a lot of people that I've had contact with, either saw right away kind of what was going on with the bigger picture of things and pulled away, or they got into it and they got wrapped in for a while and then they pulled away, and they saw that this thing is becoming something like you even said akin to an NGO. And I was thinking that GenSpec in particular, they sold out of a parent conference, a parent weekend, where 3 of the top, like psychotherapists, if you will, or professional therapy professionals are going to be at this weekend thing at $3,000 a head. Who can afford that? So of course, and it's sold out, and it's in America, and it's on the East Coast. It's not that far from New York, and where a lot of these pockets of these families that have money, and I know that there are people that are traveling across the country to go to this thing. That leads me to another thing that we've talked about a little bit. I'm not going to get into it in depth, but this idea that you've got a vulnerable population of wounded people. These are parents that were surprised. They were taken by surprise for a variety of reasons of this uninvited guest, I always like to say, coming into their homes. But these parents literally were targeted because of capitalism in the greater scope of things, right? You were talking about access to technology. Well, yeah, basic, real hardcore in terms of, I know the poverty neighborhoods in East Oakland, from where I am, those kids don't even have internet. If they get a phone at all, they're lucky and they have to go to hotspots or something like that. They don't just have cellular stuff and unlimited, access to things. So we're watching this spread, and it really frightens me that this is going to become something where right now, where you and I are saying that, yeah, the general public thinks this is bullshit. They think it's bullshit that somebody like, I like to call him Liar Thomas, these swimmers, these male swimmers are listed as females, breaking all these records and whatnot. And yet the resources and the attention for something like that is so much greater that the public hears about it and they can make decisions, and they're maybe getting piqued. But what they don't hear about is like the work that Amy Ichikawa is doing out of the Los Angeles area with the incarceration of women literally being trapped in their cells while violent men are coming into the prisons. That's not the sexy thing that people want to talk about. They're looking at the sports, and it's good that people are seeing that. And I'm not putting that down at all, but it's about the thing of how much do we separate the signal from the noise? What do we get to pay attention to? Who's putting money behind certain things that actually comes to the forefront?
Right. Well, that also ties into the racial aspect of this thing that you were talking about, because these are, the middle class to upper class kids were initially the ones that were targeted, still are. And their parents are helping to create these organizations, these NGOs, right? And they flock together, and then they become bigger, and money goes into them, and the money that could be spread out to have a whole lot of diversity of perspectives. These other people, bloggers, writers, journalists, whatever, are kind of starving and begging for money, while all this big money is going to these big organizations, right? So you have a very, very white demographic of people speaking, which cuts off all of these other perspectives of all of these other cultures. It's one of the reasons I opened up the global page on the blog, to give other cultures an opportunity to have a voice out there in this issue, because their cultures are being colonized by this, and ultimately it is a movement of slavery. I mean, they're colonizing humans, and human sex to create a new slave class. So, and look at, the people, how many people do you know that are Black or Indigenous or Asian that have a big voice, on the blogosphere, or the YouTube sphere, and then here comes this very perceptive and powerful and funny Black woman, Karen Davis, and she starts peeling the onion on all of this. And holy shit, the vilification starts just pouring out of her, even though other people are making critiques, she's getting all the vilification. I actually got a note from somebody, from Angus Fox in GenSpec. He's part of GenSpec, right? I think he works for the press department.
Yeah.
Now, Angus and I have worked together before. He actually did
that flow chart?
A graphic, flow chart for me, for the Pritzker family. A beautiful piece of work. Very nice guy to work with. very easy. And, you know, he wrote me this letter, you know, what I felt was very emotionally manipulative, you know, talking about what GenSpect is doing, and it's really a great program, and, you know, you have to go to the website to actually see what we're doing, and, you know, you shouldn't be listening, basically, you shouldn't be listening to Karen Davis, and she's really, you know, she's a problem within this whole thing, and, you know, I'm so hurt, and to hear her say this, that, the other thing is just, you know, really wounded me, and blah, blah, blah. And in the end, it's he says to me, if you don't basically get on board with me, I would like you to give back my chart. You shouldn't be using my chart to support your work if you are going to speak out against GenSpect.
This is the
so wait, there's more. There's more. Wait.
Okay.
So I write back to Angus. I say, Angus, you know, I got your email. That was very, very thoughtful. I really appreciate it, which I did because a lot of it was very thoughtful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's thinking about what they're doing from his own perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I said, but, you know, I thought it was very thoughtful. I said, but it's limited in scope.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know, if you'd like to branch out and get some other perspectives, I would love to have a meeting with yourself and Stella O'Malley and anybody else that you'd like to bring along, and have a discussion with myself and Karen Davis and a few other women that have been working a long time in this, against this gender industry. And, you know, we can have a respectful dialogue. We can have somebody to moderate. And we can share our perceptions about moving forward against the gender industry, what we see, what we think should happen, you know, how we're each doing different things. And please, you know, do get back to me. I would love to have this conversation. Crickets.
And what about the flow chart?
Well, I'm not giving back the flow chart. He made the flow chart for my...
You own it.
I own it. It's on my blog.
Right. But there's that manipulation that's so interesting, because it's like another aspect of stuff that happened after this criticism came out was that when we go back to the Pitt newsletter and, you know, and this big conversation they have, there were like 300 comments or whatever. And I saw in your article, and you included a Google Doc, you know, at the end of the article, and anybody that reads that, I encourage them to go down. And if you get into that, you'll see, and if you start from the bottom and go up, it's really interesting to kind of look at it that way, because it doesn't matter to me that it got heated at different points. Heat is what causes things to rise and to blow apart. And I think it's something that you and I were talking about this, rather than looking at this, like people like to say, oh, I just can't tolerate the infighting. Everything is called infighting. Wham, wham, wham. And it's like, no, this is exploration. This is good. This is like cooking. This is like watching when you're looking at an angel food cake in the, you know, in the oven, and those cracks start to split. There's something inside of those cracks that tastes really good. And if we can keep that going, no matter what those splits are, and again, get away from the personal. So somebody hurt your feelings, you know, at a meeting or at a conference or online or, you know, whatever. Somebody did whatever. I know that.
And you know, what really shocked me was when I went back the next day, because I really honestly went back to reflect, not just on what I said or what somebody I agreed with said, but the entirety of the thread was so fruitful and rich with all the varying different perspectives. And that's how we learn, for God's sakes, you know? Yeah, and it was just shut down, you know? And now going back to Karen Davis and Angus Fox, you know, here he is trying to shut her down, using the power of GenSpect and their context now as a big organization to censor people that they don't like.
Okay, so for anybody that doesn't...
And she's not allowed to speak. Can you imagine somebody trying to do this to Benjamin Boyce?
For
somehow
anybody...
I cannot see that. You know what I mean?
No, I'm with you totally there. I mean, that's where we've talked this about, racism coming into this and all this stuff. There's so many angles of this, but for anybody that doesn't know what it is that we're talking about, and you brought up Angus, do you want to do a quick overview of what it is that we're talking about? What happened? We brought up GenSpect, you brought up Angus Fox. What's this about shutting Karen Davis's voice down, and what's he have to do with that?
Well, he's tried, he's sent emails to the parents within GenSpect and asked them to go in and shut her channel down, flag it.
Let me correct you for a moment. It wasn't emails. This was a private Slack group that around.
Okay. It was a Slack group.
Okay. Yeah. And so-called, private, where I understand that there has never been, and I could be wrong because I'm not in the group, but there's never been some agreement. I mean, people have in general this idea that no one's going to take screenshots. No one's going to send in any emails. Hello, if I say nothing else in this video, everybody know that every email you write, every text you send, I don't care where it is. And if you think you're in a private group where you've got more than 150, 200, 300, what I heard one figure was up to 500 people. We're talking,
right.
This is GenSpect run, and you've got professional journalists, clinicians, psychotherapists, lawyers, and parents, which fall into all of these, many of them professionals, again, in many different professions. And to think that there's a private Slack group where Angus came in, just like, other people can do that, but he came in with a very specific
agenda,
ask and an agenda and details step by step. First of all, he assumes that everybody in there can't stand Karen Davis. I saw, an email from somebody that said, we all know that she is this and this and this. I don't want to even say it because it's so vile, but we all know how blah, blah she is. So there's an attitude, there's a general attitude among a lot of the people in there. And here along comes Angus. And I got to say, that is not his real name. And I know his real name. And no, I'm not going to mention it here. I understand people have their lives that they have to protect. He's got it on his blog. You can see in his own blog saying that the idea that he thought he could propose this to make the assumption that we're going to be enough people and propose the actual silencing and taking down of a YouTube channel of anybody, but particularly that, like you said, here's this Black American woman who really hasn't been in this fight for a very long time compared to you and I. So it's a very fresh perspective, and she's
and how many people of color do we actually have speaking up?
Which brings about the whole thing of why did she get so popular too? Because she's speaking to normal, everyday people. There are a lot of people that are not just these, they think that she's got, this mind control over you and I and whatever. I honestly have not seen, she does so much content with bad technology.
I know.
I'll watch Karen. There was a big period of time after she came on. I watched a lot, and then it was like I didn't even see her for months, and then I'd come back to certain pieces and whatever. But this idea that especially, and race is something that I think us as Americans who care enough to pay attention to this, and women like you and me who have worked with a variety of people in the left movement in different ways. I know you come from some deep resistance stuff. I know that you care about nature. You care about sustaining, things on the planet and all that. I have some of that, but I have other background, more stuff, like I said, animal rights activism and whatnot. And you and I have worked with a whole lot of different groups and done, I don't know what all Karen's background is. It doesn't matter. To me, this is a woman that came out of nowhere. She's very sophisticated in a way. She has life experience. She's no dummy. This is a very educated woman, formally and life experience. And that's what I care about. I feel like a lot of these people that end up heading organizations or becoming these voices in any movement or whatever, that they might have the letters after their name. or they've got a book out, or there's something that puts them in this place of worship that, we all love to worship celebrity, and we want leaders that are going to tell us what to do. And, we fall into this thing of just kind of giving up. And I know that at this point, I feel, and something I'd like to have a conversation with Karen about, is this idea where any of us that have the privilege like this, Jennifer, you and I, to be in something that, will be online. This video that, we're doing will be online at some point. That's a privilege. I'm never blind about that. And that there are new voices that can come along that haven't had the kinds of experiences you and I have to really think about this stuff and analyze it a lot. When Karen Davis popped onto the scene, she said, I see this stuff and I'm not sure how to deal with it. So I thought I'd start a channel and just kind of, it's my own therapy to try to figure out and talk out, and see what kind of feedback I get and learn more. And I mean, her coming into her format, we're watching somebody who over a period of a year, now little plus, really is hit a different kind of stride than where she was, all that time ago, those many months ago. But it also shows.
She's also, I think she's trained in psychoanalysis in some level.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Psychiatry or psychology.
Psychology.
She's enormously perceptive. And the fact that she's coming in from the outside, that she hasn't been in the gender critical community for eons now. Mm-hmm. She's not swimming in the same sea as we are. She can see it with new eyes, very, very fresh. And this is one of them. This is, such a powerful part of her channel, because she can go in there and she doesn't even know. I think she probably didn't know initially when she started calling out the crazy, that's going on in this community, that she would receive such, hell for it. Like, it's obviously crazy. So why wouldn't you just say so? Like, men aren't women. And so why is this professional organization platforming people that are identifying as the opposite sex? I mean, it's kind of crazy, isn't it? Now, that seems like completely logical to me. But I see how people that have been swimming in this sea so long just think it's like outlandish. It's outrageous. And it's funny. And the further she went with this, the more she'd make parody out of it. And I think partly people are reacting to that part, the parody part.
They can't stand it.
But it's hilarious. It's so funny. She's like this. I've said a couple of times in the past few weeks that she's like a Nobel Prize winning political cartoonist without the sketches. You know what I mean? Because she's got everything nailed, but there's no sketches. It's just a verbal sketch. It's very,
I think that pushback.
Funny.
I think that pushback too that she wasn't expecting was the thing that brought so many to her and got her channel up high. Because as much as there was the pushback, there was a greater swell of support and thank God, right? Because here's the other thing is that there are a number of us, and I would put myself in this category, older women who really don't have two fucks anymore to care about this, because we've already chosen. I know for me, Jennifer, years ago, I chose to die on this hill. If this is what was going to happen, if I was going to have men coming into the, back in the 70s when they started coming into our music festivals, when they started to show up at bookstore readings with their new book and they were reading it from a perspective of being a lesbian woman, and women clamoring around to listen while a tiny minority of us, as opposed to the accepting handmaidens, as we say sometimes, was astonishing to me then. And I knew the moment it happened, I thought, we can squish this right now. No problem. We'll nip this in the bud, right? Oh no. It just got bigger and bigger. The scale of this thing got bigger and bigger. And we're dealing with the same thing now. We're literally, you have an organization, as you say, that goes not just with the platforming of these people that live these 24/7 fictions. And kids see that website. I got an email from a parent, I just got to throw this in here, who told me that when they were talking to their teenager, how they looked at the website because they were trying to do the whole truthful thing, and they did, and they've succeeded with that as well. They tried to do the whole truthful thing with their kid, and their kid saw the website, and this is a girl, and she saw a picture of Erin Kimberly and said, that's what I want to look like. That's what I want to do. How do we not see? It's just like the thing, again, going back to race. If you have an organization that is filled with white faces, but you're constantly virtue signaling that you need people of color to come into your organization, they're not going to come into your organization if that's all they see. And we've got organizations like that all over the place that are in the so-called, liberal movement and whatnot. So you bring along, Karen, again, to me, what we saw happen in that pit discussion of 300 comments. Also, I think that you and I probably around the same time, because we had both commented in there, to see the racism come up. One of the people that saw it, it was really interesting. It was Erin Brewer, and she saw this comment that somebody made, and she said, "Oh my God," like cringe. Like she said, it just, made her cringe, and she wrote that. There's the other thing, that when they took away all those comments, the growth and the idea of seeing this very upset parent who decided to use racism with, I don't think she even knew if it's a she, I think it is. I don't think she even realized what she had done. Even when the other woman who identifies as a Black woman, I want to say that just because of her moniker that she used, Think Black Woman was her moniker. People were already focusing on Karen Davis, the Black woman, who has this YouTube channel that she kept criticizing. And they assumed that Think Black Woman was Karen. So that when this woman got mad and she's responding to her, she says, Karen, comma, and she starts to write. And I saw that and went, oh, we can't have more than one. It possibly can't be that there would be more than one Black woman or man that could come into this conversation. Heaven forbid. And then Karen Davis came in,
and speak up with any authority,
with thought, with thoughtfulness, with authority, with analysis. I mean, anything, right? And then all of a sudden we've got two Black women in the conversation. One is hammering away, still asking the questions, no matter what they said to her, hammering away and saying, you call me whatever you want, but why aren't you answering these questions over and over? And the other woman, just again, analysis, like you said, thoughtful, depthful stuff. And what happened was
being answering the questions.
But here's the thing, it exploded into emotions. And that's the thing, that it just went into this series of emotions. And again, just, it went away from what some of us were trying to say, which is what you were trying to say. And then you said it again in your article. This is about a whole industry. And some of the parents were like, you don't know what it's like to have a kid that right in the moment, they're trapped in this and they're in that thing. And you stick to your lane, girl. You know the money. You've been doing a good job at that. Don't you dare come in and tell me anything about my kid. You know nothing about children. And then the assumptions also for any women that didn't mention that they were a parent, that they were a particular kind of anything, that has no ideas. I'm sorry, I'm a single person here, but you know what? Through the course of my life, I helped to raise 3 different kids. It's not a foreign thing to me. And no, I don't have the immediate experience of having a kid, get off the internet and then tell me he wants to, a son that says he needs to have his penis cut off, or a daughter that says, I want my breasts off, I'm this, I'm that. Yes, that direct experience certainly is something, but still the principles of what you were focusing on, to me, they don't change. It's just like that woman that's written today, they printed today. Tell your kids the fucking truth from the beginning. And, so they got deep into this cult, this new religion, this new gang, this new family, whatever. That's why kids run away and go join these so-called glitter families from these influencers you were talking about, like could be on YouTube. This stuff is dangerous for sure. But how dare anybody talk about women that are single or who haven't had children? Girls are born and bred. I don't care if you have brothers or sisters or if you have children in your life or whatever. Being a female in this society, and it's something that separates men from women, is that girls know from the moment they bleed, oh shit, I might get pregnant, have a baby, and have to take responsibility of another human being. Men are not raised like that. Boys are not raised like that. That's why we see so many fathers go, missing. But women have a different thing of responsibility. It's just innately there. We do, in general, care for children. And as I have said many times, I know privately I've talked to you about this, Jennifer, and had very tearful sessions with people that when I thought that big pharma, and I didn't know it, but because of you, thank God, I understood more and my world fell into place about the money. As a lesbian and seeing only the beginnings that were happening in the lesbian community, where I saw women going off and getting their breasts cut and thinking that they had to, quote, become men and all that. I thought they're going after lesbians. I didn't see my straight women friends starting to do this. It was years before that was going to happen. And I certainly didn't think they were going to go after children. It still guts me to the core. And that's why I can't stop.
The implied sentiment on this pit thread of comments by many of the parents, not all, because some of them, very well saw what we were trying to say, was that we didn't care. We couldn't understand and we didn't care about their kids, right? Mm-hmm. When I can't even say, how deeply it's impacted me. These parents' stories have impacted me, what they've been going through. And these kids, how they're caught up to the point of, really just literally begging to have their bodies mutilated in this way. I mean, it's so horrendous. It's so horrendous. And to think that we don't care about this, we're skipping over that part because we're into political purity.
Mm-hmm.
That was so insulting to me.
The spirals of purity spirals. You mean that whole thing that came up like that phrase?
I mean, it's like we are activists. We've been immersed in activism for years. We understand that you're not going to get what you want. You're not going to save your kid unless everybody is saved. Mm-hmm. Unless this agenda is sent back to hell from where it came. This is just going to continue and continue and continue and continue. You might put a little minor stopgap on some little piece of it, but overall, it's just going to continue and continue and continue. Unless we stand up in unison, mm-hmm. And so I think, going back to the beginning, the people freaking out about the divisiveness within this community, mm-hmm. And my saying that it's a really good thing, what I see right now is that a lot more women are coming forward now. A lot more women, especially, mm-hmm. are willing to say, nah, this is just insanity. Platforming, men that are excusing pedophilia, that are excusing other fetishes, that are normalizing them within mm-hmm. the culture. When we see what's happening with the normalization of fetish, mm-hmm. That are giving voices to people that are still stuck in this cult, that have mutilated themselves, that are still taking drugs to appropriate the sex of the opposite sex. Mm-hmm. They're saying no to the madness because that's exactly what it is. It's absolute madness to do this. Mm-hmm. If you're safeguarding children, if you're trying to speak out against this agenda, you can't wait for people to get on board, for there to be some kind of safety, for people to feel some kind of comfortable before you tell the truth. You just have to tell the truth. And the more people that do that, they embolden other people to do that along with them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're going to stand in direct opposition to that, then there's going to be division.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. We are moving forward. We are not going to allow for this narrative any longer.
Mm-hmm.
No equivocating, no compromise with reality. That's the bottom fucking line. You know, there's no compromise with reality. They are trying to take reality right out from under us.
Mm-hmm.
They want us living in a techno metaverse.
Yeah.
You know, and we're already halfway there. And the time to stand up to this is now, because they have the children in their maw and they're not going to stop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you brought up earlier about the therapeutic model, what do you think is the danger in that? Or what are the advantages? You said a little bit about that. I know I have my own opinions about it and experiences that I've seen with it. But what do you think is the worst?
You know, therapy, you know, on any level, therapy for anything. If you've got, you know, you hate living in a capitalist society. You know, when you go to therapy, you know, and you have all these issues because you know, you have to work, you know, 8 hours a day to pay your bills and it doesn't even cover your bills. And so you're stressed out. And so then you go and you have to work 2 jobs and, you know, and now you're really, really stressed out and you have to go get some medication from your therapist, right? And so they're going to give you some drugs to tamp down your feelings about living this horrible existence.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to give you some talk therapy so that you work your way through this feeling,
mm-hmm.
right? As opposed to if you sit there long enough and you don't get any therapy and you don't get any drugs, chances are you're going to get politically active mm-hmm. and you're going to stand up to this system, mm-hmm. right? So that's my, you know, that's my aversion to talk therapy and therapy. Though I do, again, I think it's critical for some people who've especially lived through trauma, you know, and I don't say that it's a terrible thing in this situation with parents and their children either. However, like I said, it should really be time limited. You know, it should be time limited and move on to activism and changing the system. Mm-hmm. You cannot sit there and just allow for the system to continue and think that you're helping anything. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah.
So your child desists, so 20 other children take it on. And they have to grow up in that environment, your child. Mm-hmm. And who knows when they're going to slip back into it. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah, and this idea of us living in a digital society, if that's something that we're really kind of getting at the crux of here, and what you just brought up, if there's one kid that's desisted, that kid is not, it goes back to the promotion too. That kid isn't elevated at all. They have a really hard time maintaining that with all of the bombardment, right, of this constant thing. So a lot of these kids, you can say, well, you know, they can't help it. But I don't think it's really that different from other fads that have occurred. What is different that is incredibly, that's permanent, is that this is different than getting your ears pierced or a tattoo even that is permanent on your body. We're talking about medical experimentations that kids are saying that they are, as you said earlier, they're willing and even begging to have this done. This stuff, this education has to start with the families early on now, because we are in 2022. Anybody that sees this should understand now that there are parents that have been going through this. There's some veterans at this now who have managed to keep their kids from having their bodies destroyed. This has been going on maybe for some people 6 years, you know, until their kids reach a certain age. But going back to this idea, and I brought up the word about abolishment because I brought up Karadanski's book. I think that you and I both agree that we're not just talking about regulating anything. I know that I don't care about regulating anything, but I do know that change happens in steps. So the protests, for instance, that I've organized with Can I Get a Witness, we're not just going against all clinics that do plastic surgery and experimentation, you know, on people. We've been going after the pediatric hospitals and clinics and clinicians that have their offices where they literally put kids, you know, like on the train towards all those surgeries and everything. I do, though, in general, I see the goal of being abolition of all of this stuff about the gender industry, not regulating it. And the more that some organization thinks that we can regulate, or they're nervous and they think we have to do these baby steps and bring other people in, I think we're way beyond that. Like I said, going back to my own experience of thinking about a conference where I thought that I had to have a 24/7 LARPer that people would like, and they would accept this person, and then they would talk and they would feel more comfortable because nobody was rejected, in this thing, the very thing that I really wanted everybody to be talking about. And that's the thing that, going back to the analysis that you said, we have to constantly, if you and I were working again back into, say that I was with an organization like you and we were looking at nature and how do we stop, how do we keep things sustainable? How do we continue to, connect to nature and all that? And we started an organization. I wouldn't assume that I'm going to be working with you in any other way than knowing that if we started to receive money for that organization, that everything is transparent. We know what the structure of the organization is. I know who the CEO is. I understand who the people that are working alongside that person, hopefully, rather than just being under. And the idea of how one runs an organization. And if you have somebody who's got a reputation that is increasing in a way of bullying, and I rarely use that word, but literally when you get something like a phone call or whatever, you get your email that you got saying, you have something that I gave to you and I'm going to take it back if you don't blah, blah, blah. Again, this is the same thing that, I dealt with in investigating another story last year where I literally talked to more than 20. I got 26 to really get on record with me, but that people will not say anything, and people will not, when they're in a group and something is devious as what was proposed in this big, in this Slack group with hundreds of people. When somebody proposes something devious, and I would say at this point, I'm wondering if it was illegal, especially knowing what that person's position is in life, why people decide to be quiet rather than say, look, there's something that is endemically going on here that we need to correct. How do we come correct on that so that our goal, if we really have this goal, like you say, to help the parents, you would think more people would speak up. But I've become very discouraged with all of these different things. I have probably most of my adult life, Jennifer. You go after the money. You're finding what's going on here and there all over the world. How many countries now have you had participate in the 11th hour blog for the global? I know that Japan has been represented in there. Have they not? Or is that something you're working on right now?
Yeah, Japan, the UK. I can't even really remember, to tell you the God's honest truth. I've got so much stuff in my brain, I really can't remember. I initially was dealing with many more countries than are actually represented on the blog, because I had anticipated creating a whole site for the global position, and but we couldn't get enough writers on board initially. And people that were committed to actually following through with blog posts. So that's why it became the global page. And even at this size, I'm really having difficulty. So anybody that sees this, please, whatever country you're in, it's a blog post. It's not, you're not writing a tomb, so if you can write something about your country, the gender industry in your country, please send it into the blog.
Is there a general theme that we can kind of close up here with about that you're seeing as you opened it up and it became more global? Is there a basic theme that you're seeing that is happening across the globe right now? And is there anything that people can get involved in besides, as you're inviting people from other countries what are outside the United States to talk about their own countries? But is there something that you're seeing emerge or that has happened over time now when you see these reports coming in?
Well, it just becomes more and more crystal clear that this is a global agenda. I mean, a lot of people say, look at my work and say, you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
You know, but look, I've got the receipts. It's all there. In every single country, this is happening. Not at exactly the same pace, but they mirror each other in their tactics, in what they do. They've the money, the billionaires in each country sending money into these institutions to normalize fetish. And I say that not to mean that everybody who is presenting like this, with this issue of body dysphoria related to your genitalia, has the fetish of autogynephilia, but that this issue fetishizes human sex. It breaks us into parts. It makes objects of all of us. It commodifies all of us. So in that way, it is fetish. And it stems from the fetish of autogynephilia. I mean, that's at the very, very root of this issue. So it's just exacerbated the more and more normalized it is. This is what happens, and this is not an accident. This is not a phenomenon. This is engineered for the market through very, very rich men who have this problem, and they want it normalized, and they want to break us apart because we're much more valuable as parts than we are as whole beings. And they want to change humanity. They want to meld us more and more with tech, and they have an idea of a techno utopia, where we are all, part of AI. That we are melded with AI to become a superior race. It's eugenics, and it's way out of hand. I mean, obviously. I mean, when you start butchering young children, giving them drugs for some crazy, insane idea that you have in your head, I think we can assess that safely that it's completely out of hand, but it's happening in every single country in the same exact way. And many of the largest players, the largest LGBT NGOs in the world, are at the root, as well as these billionaires with this issue, with the fetish of autogynephilia. And they're sending money through our institutions to change, to change the way that people think.
And they're doing this with language first, right? I mean, that has to happen. Language and law, same thing.
Sure. And the media. The media is all governed by pharma. It's all pharma. Which is why we can't, which is why, especially on the left, we can't get anything through, critiquing this issue. Because, capitalism has basically, drawn up the whole left. I mean, they've sent, how shall I say this? They usurped the left that used to be there. And through the left channels, all the left social channels, they're driving this issue, which is really neoliberalism. It's not the left. It's not democratic. It's tyranny. But they've sent it through left channels to make it look progressive.
Yeah. Like I said, that's the new right for me, is I'm always...
Right. It's the new left. It's absolute madness. And they're calling it progressive, waving their flags and, it's liberation, and it's all corporatism, it's all corporatism. It's terrifying. It's terrifying because people don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things a little bit, going back to the parental thing, I don't know where I've been, but I never heard this phrase that just got brought to my attention recently, which has to do with the Trump derangement syndrome. And I mentioned that to you and you were like, oh yeah, that's been around for a while. But I think there've been so many people on the left bringing this political thing up again that, in 2016, were so, hopeful and wanting and all this stuff. They freaked out so badly that Trump won, I was one of those people that was like, yeah, no brainer. I thought, I wasn't surprised at all. And that people that recently I was at I went to see the cultural thinker and whatnot, Fran Lebowitz. She did a visit to the Bay Area, and I watched her, and somebody asked her in the audience, if you could rewrite 1 week of your life, go back and think about, something that really happened, like you could rewrite that. What would you like to rewrite? She didn't think about it 2 seconds. She said, the moment that the week after Trump got elected, and she said she was depressed for so long and didn't function. And I went, oh my God, these are the conversations, and you'll get why I'm going here, going back to the parents as well. I think that there are a lot of progressive and liberal parents, that I've met throughout the course of these conversations that absolutely got so their worlds were just blown apart, and they just got really, oh my God, everything's horrible. Well, if you've got teenagers in the house or preteens or whatever too, and now they're spending a lot more time online, and you're freaking out about, it's like the end of the world. There was a period of time where people were really depressed, and it's like they couldn't move or something, and they kept waiting, and they were just talking about Trump all the time. And we saw the friendships and the families that went, right, and just exploded.
Yep.
You voted for Trump, you're out of my life, You voted for gone, Clinton, boom. People just cut. And more of that left and right stuff, the black and white thinking. And I think that is partially to blame for us getting sidetracked as a society in terms of being progressives and liberals and all that. People let themselves get so flipped out. They kind of lost the idea to even want to do anything active. I didn't see it really energizing people to, look at the bills that were happening or what could they do. They just stayed in this state of freak out with Rachel Maddow on the TV on MSNBC, 24/7, while the other people are laughing their heads off, and they're on Fox or Newsmax or something, cheering it on. I think the adults in general kind of left the room in a way. And this is not to put this blame, again, this whole thing where people are, you're blaming the parents again. I think a lot of people that were raising kids in that time that were vulnerable to a very specific kind of attack, and then add COVID onto it. I mean, 2020 just, it's something that the gender mapper, Erin brought this up. She said that OnlyFans, boom, the number of people that got on OnlyFans in 2020 was crazy. Was absolutely crazy. And there we go, how everything is interconnected and all this. And it all goes back to support your hypotheses, which you've been talking about for years now, Jennifer. I want to thank you so much, not just personally for waking up my lesbian world where I went, where's that tea coming from? Why is this going on? Why is this LGBT center that is so large that there's no way we can possibly fill it with cultural events and things like that? This money, I couldn't even fathom what was going on. And I know that you had to do your digging to find out what was going on because of the ways that you were getting rejected to be able to even rent a place, to be able to have a talk about, stuff. And people come to
Joey, I'm still working, I'm still, you said I had kind of I started out, being an environmentalist. I'm still an environmentalist.
Right.
It's just that this took priority. How
right.
can you fight for your planet if you're not a human being?
Yeah.
I think this has a little bit of a priority. How can you speak for women's rights if you're not a woman? How can you speak for anything if you're not human? They're coming for humanity, man. They want to change us. This is the eugenics project at the root of this whole thing.
And I think that's ultimately
what's globally, and it's terrifying.
Yeah.
If I wasn't an activist, I couldn't handle the information that I take in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to have a gallows humor around some of this stuff because it is so insane. But I think that going back to that ultimately we're going to win this pro-reality idea over because more people are finding out how insane this is, that it is to the core. This is a destruction of humanity, as you said. This isn't a feminist issue. Yes, it is a feminist issue, but it's not just a feminist issue. This is not just a gay and lesbian issue. This is not just a child issue. This is not a parenting issue. This is an everybody, every race, every class. And now we're seeing, you're talking about the NGOs, that affects government, it affects education, it affects...
These people and their money are everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere I go, Joey. Everywhere I go. That, you know, everything is saturated with this ideology.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely terrifying. People have got to get a clue, and they've got to move forward. And I think, you know, in the past 6 months to a year, I mean, I've been dealing with this for like, what, 7, 8 years now?
Mm-hmm.
In the past year, things are really shifting now. You know, the ground is really shifting under us. And I think people feel that too. You know, and in the last 6 months, even more so.
Yeah.
Boom, really shaking up now. And more information is getting out, and more people are acting now. More people are getting active, and we're going to see a lot more of that. And that's why I say, you know, it's good that things are shaking up and people are separating. You know, I don't want to be working with somebody whose ideas are antithetical to my own. You know,
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm going to separate from you. I'm going to move on to people who have got it. Mm-hmm. You know, we cannot give any credence whatsoever to this ideology. Nothing. You can give nothing to this. They are so powerful. You have to meet it with the truth. Everywhere. Mm-hmm. Normal people, activists, parents, feminists, men, you know, if you're a parent, wherever you are, you have to lend no credence to this ideology. Stop platforming these AGPs. If you want to, you want to give somebody an education about AGP, talk about what's going on in the culture today. Talk about, separation, disconnection, obsessiveness, compulsiveness around sex and why that's happening. Because we're being broken apart. Our communities are being broken apart. Our intimacy with one another is broken apart. So of course our sexuality is going to be broken apart. Mm-hmm. It's going to be objectified. We're going to obsess over things and yeah, well, I'm getting on my rant here, but if that's what, if you want to educate about AGP, stop talking, stop platforming the men who have it and having them discuss their fetish and how they stole their mother's underwear and, please talk about the destructiveness of fetish. Fetish is not healthy sexuality. That's why it's called fetish. That's why it's called a paraphilia. That's why it's separated from normal sexuality. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to normalize all this. Mm-hmm. In the metaverse, you can't hurt anybody. There's no abusive sexuality in the metaverse because everything is technology, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah, well, this is the same shit they said about porn. What's the matter with porn? It's just speech. Mm-hmm. Well, look where we are now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you'd say that our closing line can be, the advice to everybody is hold the line.
Hold the line.
Hold the line. No exceptions. I go back to an article that you wrote about leave your friends at home. Jennifer, thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
Oh, thanks for having me, Joey.
I
don't think you and I have ever done a platform together, so
no.
Even, Can I Get a Witness conference? I was
you sent me a pre-recorded thing. Yeah.
Pre-recorded thing. So this is nice.
And doesn't that seem like, again, that was August of 2020. Doesn't that feel like a decade ago?
It does. It really does.
That's the other reason that Karen Davis is so refreshing, because of that same thing. Like, she hasn't been, as you say, swimming in this. Is like, listen to this fresh voice of somebody who goes, wait a minute. And as she said, what is this? What is that? What are we looking at?
What are we looking? No, it's good. It's good stuff.
We'll do this again. Thanks so much.
I love that. Thanks,
okay. Take care.